we'll stand and say the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Call the meeting to order. First on the agenda will be the agenda approval. Any additions or changes to the agenda?
None that I'm aware of.
All righty.
I'll make the motion to approve.
Thank you, Steve.
I'll second.
Thank you, Shar. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, next on the agenda is public input. I'm going to change things up a little bit today. If there's anybody that has public input that is not related to Fardin Township, if you want to come up now, what I'm going to do is have a kind of an open forum in a sense, which will actually be in a short period of time here with the Fardin Township, so that all you folks will have a chance to speak at that point. But if anybody has public input that's not related to Fardin Township, alrighty, if not, I'll close the public comment period and move on to the consent agenda, which has all been approved. So we'll be on to the old business, which is the RFQ for Fardin Township Industrial Development.
Mr. Chair, we approve the agenda,
Oh,
but not
okay.
the consent.
Okay, any additions or subtractions to the consent agenda?
None.
Okay, motion?
I move.
Thank you,
approve.
Tom.
I'll second.
Thank you, Steve. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay. Now to old business, the RFQ for Fardin Township Industrial Development. To begin with, I'd like Administrator Jeff Cadwell just to give a little history here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just wanted to clarify the circumstances that brought us to this point and what we're actually asking with the RFQ for development. The conversation began a couple of years ago with DEED and other economic developers in the state who identified the need for large parcels of land. People are looking to invest and build and develop large parcels of land that are in close proximity to many kind of resources. A good highway system, rail access, and good utility access. We tried to find a way to purchase the old Potlatch land. That'd be a fantastic place for this, but it's price prohibitive. The owners of that are not willing to sell at a market rate. They're looking for 5 or 6 times the market rate for that parcel. So we identified the TFL parcels that we did for several reasons, primarily because of the rail access and relative ease to get to Highway 2. And then this past year, the board authorized the purchase of the tax forfeited parcels by the EDA. So that has happened. Those are no longer public lands. They belong to the Hubbard County EDA. And now this RFQ for Fardin Township Industrial Development, the intention of this is to find a qualified planner or engineer to actually do the public input, to gather the information you are here to present at this point in time, so that park development could be done and road development could be done in a way that meets the needs of the community. So the intention here, this is not listing any of these parcels for sale. This is hiring a qualified planner or engineering firm to do the field work, to work with Fardin Township and the residents to come up with a plan to develop these parcels that meets everybody's needs. Now, that would address things like the trails that run through that area. That would address things like having buffer strips around the outside edge of it to minimize the impact. That would have to do with identifying the types of development that's suitable for the area. Not every type of development would be suitable. So that's what this, at the end, at some point today, the board is going to determine if they're ready to take the next step and actually look for a firm who's willing to do that master planning for us, and then work with Fardin Township and the local citizens to get the information we need to understand how to best develop that parcel. So that's the background statement that I wanted to make, because I think there was some thought that this is just putting these parcels up for sale to the highest bidder, and that's not the case at this point.
Thank you. So I guess we'll have some public comment here. If you're going to comment, please sign in with the name and address. And try to limit your time, because it looks like there's a lot of folks who would like to comment here today. So if anyone would like to start.
Good morning, Commissioners, and Ms. Thompson and Mr. Caldwell. Oh,
Just a little closer to you. You got a
Does that
soft
help?
voice. For some people, I'll tell them to push away, but that's better.
okay, thank you. We're here because of the process that obviously you guys are undertaking, and
Could you state your name, please?
oh, I'm sorry, Linda Tran. Do you want my address and whatnot as well, or is that on the paper? 30929 Water Wheel Road, Cass Lake, Minnesota, up in Fardin Township. So when we became aware of this, I know there was a meeting held at Fardin Township to discuss how access to this property was going to happen. And one of the things that the township, unfortunately, none of the community members knew that meeting was taking place, so the town board, their concern was that this was going to go past the park. And that was one of the requests, that this avoid that park. Since then, it has been brought to our attention that some contacts have been made with the railroads and different utilities out there, that if this was to proceed forward, the railroad crossings at 315th and 323rd Street would be closed, because the railroad will not allow the 3 crossings in that area within that mile. So if that does in fact happen, the only way to get to the north part of this property would be in fact to go past the park, that the township, that was their one request, that this avoid. And if that railroad crossing does get closed, there's no other access into that property. And then as far as the property on the south of the road, or of the railroad tracks, that proposal, according to your RFP, is to build a road across, on top of the pipeline between 317th Avenue and 315th Avenue, and across the pipeline going into this establishment. I've lived in that area for over 30 years. That parcel, that area is dug up on a regular basis by the pipeline. So when they dig up that pipeline, they will be digging up your road. That's just what they do, the general maintenance. There's 5 pipelines running through there at this time that are still maintained. The other side of that is a high-powered electric line that there is no place to go south of there because of that high-powered electric line as well. So that's that part of it. Originally, you guys showed improving 500th Street out to Highway 2 past the cemetery. That's building over a mile of new highway, or Class 10 highway. The other, and now I see on the RFQ that you've put in the second option, which would be to use County Road 101, which is currently a tarred highway, tarred road, but that is a very residential area in our neighborhood. We use that to get to the park. People flow through there. There's a high residential area. To have that kind of commercial construction and commercial property traffic going on that road, when you have kids on bikes, you have strollers, you have dogs, you have people riding bikes, you have people running, that is a very high utilized, not only for traffic, that is a cut across for anybody living off from the Nary Road. They cut across that road to get to Highway 2. So there's already high traffic, there's high pedestrian and other on that road that we just feel hasn't been taken into consideration when looking at this location. So during the meeting, we also brought up, so those are the reasons why we would rather not have that traffic going on 101 and what that looks like. There was an alternative site way back a couple years ago when you guys started this, using the site down off from 500th Street. And that actually gives you 338 feet of Highway 2 frontage, and there's actually a cross right in front of that. It's the exit that goes to Berge Stoves that goes right into that property. You don't have to cross Enbridge. You don't have to put your road across Enbridge. You don't have to put your railroad spur across Enbridge's lines. There wouldn't add that commercial traffic to the residential area in the park. It is not the property that's on the reservation, although there is an opportunity that there is an additional 20 acres of tax forfeited land that is on the reservation, that if a interested native-owned business wanted to open an establishment, there would be an opportunity there to hook that up to your industrial park. 500 Street has 2 houses on it, and they're both right down by 101, so closing that highway to be able to get to this would put zero pressure on most people. And there's 5 properties that have houses that butt up to this, and it would be the backs of their houses, not putting traffic past their front doors. So I'm here to request that you do further research. Call the county engineer, have them go and look and see if it's even feasible to build a road across the pipeline and put up railroad spur over the top of a pipeline before you spend money hiring a consultant who's going to find out that same information. Only you're going to spend additional taxpayer dollars on top of the $500,000 you've already spent to purchase this property. And I'm just going to say too that the property has been clear cut now. You've already changed the dynamic of our neighborhood. We use that property, public property, to recreate back there, and it has been stripped already because I believe you put the cart before the horse. But please reconsider doing this at this time. I found a lot of information very quickly, and if your highway engineer was included in this process, I believe you'll find out that this road going across the pipeline is not feasible. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Set this guy up here so I can point. Good morning. Is this okay? All right. My name is Diane Sullivan Huberty. My address is 30771 500th Street in Cass Lake. As I said, I live next to Midge Lake, so my address, we would be right there. That is us. My husband Dan, who is also here today, works in forest research. Most industrial parks are located far from residential and ecological sensitive areas. This proposal does neither. This map that was in the Park Rapids paper earlier shows the slope and the arrows all running towards Midge Lake and the adjacent Necktie River watershed. The northwest corner, right here, of the proposed site is less than 250 yards from Little Midge. Our soil is sandy and our water table is high, as shown by these wetland indicators, making it susceptible to contamination from runoff, accidents, or negligent future business owners that could be in the proposed park. In this zone, as mentioned, Enbridge has 5 lines that are in red. They cross our property and have been excavated 2 times in 3 years due to sensor alerts going off just by little disturbances. Who is liable if these disturbances from a new road and railroad spur cause crude oil leaks in the same watershed? We are also concerned about noise, which would be magnified across the lake, as well as smells. Finally, residents would like a chance to talk with officials before the tax dollars are spent on this process, which seems to be moving a little fast. Most of the neighbors and lake people that I spoke to only knew bits, and some had zero knowledge of this because they don't get the Park Rapids paper. We don't have it sitting in restaurants up there. Subscriptions arrive sometimes a week, 2 weeks later, if at all, due to the UPS postal service. Could this be paused and an alternate site considered? I emailed this document this morning that shows the overhead lines by Lower Midge Lake. If any of you want a copy, I can hand you one that we printed off. But that just gives you a reference of who we are and the proximity so many people have to this in this area. So I'll leave them up here in case you need one. Thank you.
Diane. Next.
I'm Tim Allen. I own a small business up there. 50100 Widening Gladen is my address. Part of my questions is we had a little informative meeting on Sunday afternoon at our office just to house the membership of our town, our area that we're in question. It was just interesting because there was a lot of good questions, and it was just a culmination of trying to find out information that was available, which didn't seem like we had much. It was little tidbits that they could find and stuff. So I guess my question as it relates to is, what is the reasoning behind it? Is it to put more land on the tax roll? If that's the case, it's to save us tax dollars. What is the implication of that, I guess? Like, how much are we gonna save? Because if we're looking to turn a small township like Farden into an industrial hub in northern Hubbard County, it's like, I wanna know what I'm gonna sell my soul out for. Because I had another piece of property that was affected by the purchase of some land by another company, and it negatively affected water, air quality, quite a few things. So I have a lot of skin in the game in this one as far as what that's gonna happen, because what you guys are requesting with a rail spur, that's not just any small company. I mean, we're talking major heavy industrial, very, very close to residential neighborhoods, very, very close to this park, which is a big issue because my grandkids play there all the time. And we can't handle the traffic because it's not only this 65 station rail spur that's got to go in there. Now we're talking all the trucks that take to feed that, all the employees that are taking to feed that. That's a huge impact on this area. I drove it the other day. I mean, it's 3,000 lineal feet over the pipeline. I've worked on the pipeline a lot. I'm not quite sure what the proposal is for that to build over the top of this pipeline, 3,000 feet. That's a long ways to build a road over it. And I mean, we're always matting over the top of them. So how are we gonna build a permanent road to access this? From the other end, we have the Necktie River, which comes in 1,000 feet. So we're losing a lot of this property as far as with the pipeline, with the power, with the Necktie coming in, with, lower marshland and stuff. So it's like, there's other pieces of property that are very much equivalent to it with better access that we aren't losing because of these issues, which I think they're gonna be very difficult issues to deal with. How does this, like, if we're looking at this, like I said, for tax rate was one of them that I heard, and with making this an industrial hub, well, how does that affect our tax values? Because my tax values have went through the roof because of the Cass Lake School District. Is that necessarily because of you guys? No, not at all. But I was sold on that a cup of coffee a day. It cost me $12.60 a day. Just my taxes for that. Well, how much money are we gonna save? It better be a lot. Because, I mean, just to put this in, to drive my taxes, or to drive my property values down now because I have this major industrial hub in my backyard, I bought in knowing Potlatch was there, the old Ainsworth building was there, Northern Aggregate was there, Storley Construction is there. I bought that knowing that. Now you're changing what I bought. I'm not against development, but what I do ask is, hey, if we're gonna change what we have, we're a very small township. I mean, these people all bought out there because of where we're located at and because of what we've got there as far as the quietness. So, and the transparency, the hard part for me on transparency, I know you guys are only required to put it in the Park Rapids paper, it sounds like. But we have to figure out I'm not on social media, never have been, never will be. I have a Facebook page for my office. We have to fight with each other to get somebody to put it on. I don't live or die by Facebook. In fact, I can't stand it. So it's just, I think most everybody behind here, it's just trying to figure out exactly what's going on because we really don't know what's going on. We don't know, the scope of what this is, but we see some potential for some very large business to come in here. And now we're looking to spend money on an RFQ, and it's like, well, is this the best way to spend our money? Because there's some things that jump out at us because of our working relationships with things that it potentially never even could possibly happen. And so we're just gonna spend some money for that. So I guess that's all I have. Thank you.
Now, I have one question.
Yeah.
So you said for the school district, your tax went up $12.60 a day. That's $4,599 for the school district?
You are correct, ma'am.
Yes.
Yeah, mine is double what it used to be. And that is because they finally adjusted it. It was actually higher than that. I was $8,000 the first year, just for the school.
I've looked at some of these parcels that, when people called me on this, and virtually everybody in the Cass Lake School District there in Fardin Township, more than half of their property taxes goes to the Leech Lake School District, Cass Lake School District.
It's a real struggle because we have 3 properties between myself and my wife and my kids. One of my kids are potentially looking at selling just because of the high tax rates. I heard rumor, and so this is this stipulation. It's like, well, we could save you $300 a year. Well, $300 really doesn't do me any good. And you know what, folks? I can afford it. That's not the point. The point is it the right thing to do? I mean, my kids don't go to the Cass Lake School District. I don't have a problem with the Cass Lake School District, but it was sold in a cup of coffee a day. I can order gourmet coffee, have it shipped in. I can order gourmet maple syrup to mix in it, and I'm less than $1 a day. So it's just like, are our savings worth it? I'm okay. I'm not okay with paying a lot of taxes, but I'm okay to pay more taxes to keep a large industrial development out that's probably going to belch some smoke. I know that we have stipulations on it, but, you know, or it's a gravel company that's going to come in and get gravel. I mean, I know we need that, but I don't need my groundwater polluted. You know, maybe the groundwater goes the other way. I don't care. It's going to pollute it. Our water table's very, very high there. We're within 20 to 25 feet of the groundwater. You don't take off much. So I guess that's where I'm at. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Anybody else?
Good morning. My name is Dale Yank. I live at 31206 Woodbine Drive, Cass Lake. We have 2 lots, one that our home is on Midge Lake, and another vacant lot a few hundred yards down the lake. I think all of you got this in an email. This is just a picture of the quality of life, and that's just what I'm going to talk about for a minute. We bought this lot to retire on 20 years ago because we loved the look of Midge Lake, and we wanted to pass that on to our children someday. If there had been a proposal at that time that there was going to be an industrial park just to the south of us, would we have bought that lot? Heavens no. We'd have kept on looking for someplace else. I mean, it changes entirely the quality of life and the recreation and the quietness of the area. And I'll wrap up with just a couple of comments very quickly. 2 things were told to me. When I started sharing this, and I didn't know about this until just a few days ago about this proposed industrial park. When I shared that with someone, their comment was, why would anybody want to build way out in the middle of nowhere out there, and what industry would like that? And then the second comment was at the town hall meeting the other night about this would be a very unique industrial park. There's no other one like it in the state of Minnesota. And that got me thinking, yeah, I think that means that the businesses that would ask about this industrial park are the ones that have no chance at all of getting approved in any one industrial park that's in the city limits or close to the city limits of any city. They're looking at this as a way to maybe smell a lot or pollute a lot or make a lot of noise that would never be allowed anyplace else, and that scares me. So that's my comment.
Thank you, Dale. Anybody else?
I'll sign it after. My name is Dean Nyson, 31220 Woodbine. Marshall, questions. Are we allowed to ask questions?
Sure.
This was tax forfeited land. I know I'm coming late in the game here too. Is there supposed to be a notice for public auction for tax forfeited land?
There was, yes.
There was? Okay, so,
And then we removed it for public use. It's allowed by statute for us to do that,
okay, and why was that?
so that we weren't bidding against other people to do this.
Okay. So in my opinion, tax forfeited land was forfeited to the county, correct?
Yes. At one time it was privately owned, yeah.
By the residents, privately owned property. So that should be, property that should be allowed to be purchased at a fair price, correct? Okay, so that's just, I'm wondering why we weren't allowed, because I'm sure most of the people here would have done something, somehow, some way, to keep industrial from our neighborhood. Again, we have a wonderful lake area surrounded by currently a gravel pit, which from what I understand, can anybody put a gravel pit anywhere?
If there's gravel there, yes.
Okay. So, there's impacts on our lake, groundwater, et cetera. So I think we should have had a little more say in this. I think that's all that I have to say. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak? All right, I really appreciate you all for showing up today. This is obviously part of the process for me. It's important that we hear from the public, especially for these folks that live in the township. And there's many reasons. I guess I'll just touch a little bit. I've mentioned this at Fardin Township a few times. This is a unique area, 4-lane highway and a railroad grade. You don't have that anywhere else in Hubbard County, and I've been informed that you don't see that anywhere else in the state of Minnesota. So like I say, it's kind of a unique area in that respect. I also looked at existing industry is already in the area, so I don't feel like we are really changing the neighborhood completely, but I know this will impact some people. But that's, like I say, why I started at the very beginning, wanting to make sure that the township was included in the conversations. And as Jeff had mentioned, this has been a couple of years in the process to get to this point. It's not just something we dreamed up a couple of months ago and thought we should do this. Like I say, we've been researching this. And there have been other areas that were looked at. And I know that at the last Tuesday's meeting at Fardin Township, there was another spot that was pointed out that could have potential. But today we're looking at the RFQ, the request for qualifications for this development. And we'll proceed with the meeting from there now. But like Jeff had said too, this is just a beginning point. If we award this today or send this out for today, there will be more chance for public input and stuff like that. But with that, if there's nothing else, we'll proceed on to number 6A, the RFQ for Fardin Township Industrial Development.
Mr. Chair, I'd add a couple of comments to what is proposed here. One is, there was a question about if this had been referred to the county highway engineer, we'd have a different result. When I asked the county highway engineer, this is the process she specified, so that we would have an opportunity to investigate all those options. 500th Street, 101st are two of the options that we'd ask them to study. There's obviously the route of taking 45 to 9 and coming in 101 from the south and not crossing anything in that way. So I would ask, one of the things I would ask is if we've identified it to take a look at the parcels that the county EDA has already purchased. Do you want us to study other parcels in the area that may be more suitable? Do you want us to consider additional routes in the scope of this RFQ? Do you want it to be that wide open? Remember, the reason we're doing this is because there were comments why all the economic development and HRA money is being spent in the city of Park Rapids and not in other places throughout the county. And in conversations with DEED and in conversations with other state economic developers, this intersection of a 4-lane highway and a serviceable rail line was something that was identified as being important. I know that Northern Paving is looking to work with the railroad to create a siding for the work that he's doing. I know that the development along Highway 71 south of Bemidji is just as remote from a town site as the position that we're developing or that we're proposing. And I also know that the types of industry that we think would be interested in this location are very similar to the ones that are already there. So I guess the reason for bringing this at this point in time was to let an RFQ, which means we'll get proposals. You can say no to all of them. But if we do, the intent would be to spend money to have somebody do a master planning process on these sites. If you put a caveat, identify alternate sites that might work. The problem is if we went to the old Potlatch site, they wanted 10 mil for that. And that just didn't seem like something we could ask you to support. And the other tax parcels that we identified just didn't really seem to fit. We didn't get 200 contiguous acres in any one of those spots that still had decent. And the master plan, the idea of a rail spur is something we said because the rail line is there. The master plan may identify that the people that would potentially be occupants there wouldn't need it. We don't know any of this yet without going through the master planning process. So the question before the board is simply, do you want to let an RFQ for somebody to come in and do a master planning process for us so that we can have the public input, that we can look at all the options, and then make a decision which way to go forward after that. I guess that those are the comments that I wanted to make about this, other than what you guys already know about this, based on the feedback we received this morning.
If we looked at alternate place that was suggested as an example, what would be our options? Can we exchange property, or do we have to sell
Honestly,
existing TFL that the EDA properties have?
We've
Go through the same process?
We've redeemed that, so we would have to sell that in order to get our assets out of it.
So your problem there is if that is sold, once it's sold, the EDA or the county will have no control over it.
Correct.
Outside of, well, we don't have zoning. We have shoreland zoning is all, so anything outside 1,000 feet. Somebody could buy it and put an industrial plant in there. So it's kind of unless residents or somebody bought it specifically for their own purpose to make sure development didn't happen there. I'm not opposed to exploring other options. The question being, do you explore it through the RFQ, or do we do a little homework first before we let the RFQ? I'm not sure what the best way to go is.
So the reason I would suggest, if you want to include that option, I'd put it in the RFQ, because the master planning process means that somebody other than myself or Mary are facilitating the conversations and holding the meetings to talk to the people who live there. And then report back to Varden Township officials and to this board what the findings are. And in all honesty, I mean, if we just wanted to scope it to the point of doing that, we've already had people looking at the right-of-way and the easements, and there are ways, and we've had conversations with Enbridge and the railroad, and there are engineering ways to get around the obstacles that we have there. There may be better ways to do it. So honestly, I still recommend that we go through with the process. I think we might modify it to say that we want the planning portion. So we get, if it's gonna be this much money to do the whole project, I say, let's do this first. And if we get through that process and we identify something, then we do the next phase. That would limit the amount of money that we spend up front to doing some investigation and some public meetings and report before doing any of the design work.
I was talking about the road going over the pipeline. 64, just a little bit south of the intersection of 64 and 87. The pipeline goes right underneath that paved road, 64, so there must be engineering ways around this that Enbridge can work out. I mean, that works just fine
There are a lot
there.
of roads.
Yeah, there are lots of roads
It
are,
goes under the Mississippi River.
oh yeah, under that, yep. And when I was thinking about, what industries, what came to mind was Bemidji Steel. I don't frequently drive that area, but whenever I do, I never see any smoke, and the noise level is very quiet. So those are just things that I've observed myself.
And as owners and as a board responsible for the ownership, you would have the ability to set limits on what can and can't be there. You know, you would be able to set all the criteria. That's part of the reason for having the EDA purchase and develop it, is because we don't have zoning. But if we put restrictions on what can and can't be developed in there, and what we're gonna provide, you know, like I said, for buffers, for, you know, easements for the snowmobile trails and the other trails that go through that area, those are things we can control in the development if we develop those parcels. If we sell those parcels, we lose that control. It's,
One of the major reasons we do not get development in other parts of the county, or for that matter, in most places, wherever, is you need a major corridor for shipping. And this is one of the few places, one of the only places in the county that offers rail and Highway 2s, making it very attractive for people that might have to ship large quantity or heavy items. So there necessarily isn't anywhere else that's more conducive in the county to do something like this, because of those two major factors. You look at Wadena as an example. You go down to Wadena, there's a lot of things that are located in Wadena because of the Highway 10 corridor that would just never happen in Hubbard County. And I would just add that the other thing, you know, Jeff had mentioned this too, that there was when I ran for election anyhow, conversation about why Park Rapids gets all the development and stuff like that. So we're trying to explore other options for other development throughout the county to help the local tax base in other parts of the county besides just Park Rapids too. This is an example of it, and the benefits, again, of that area are Highway 2, railroad. It would increase local jobs for the area. And also, yes, it would have an effect on tax capacity for the county as a whole, which would have a marginal effect on your taxes in your area. The larger the tax capacity of the county grows, obviously the less taxes all the constituents have to pay, because there's more value spread to other things besides just your residential property. So those are the reasons that that this is being explored here. A lot of other areas just wouldn't be conducive for it at all.
Can I ask a quick question, or no? Just a quick question.
Okay, one this time, yes.
Just the comment was made, Bemidji Steel. So you had written up light industrial and heavy industrial. I know Bemidji Steel real well. The argument isn't as much against a Bemidji Steel or a Pepsi or a Coke being placed back there if we're talking light industrial. But none of those facilities take a rail spur. They don't have the same impact as heavy industry. So when you start talking a rail spur, you're talking totally different industry than Bemidji Steel, using that as an example. So that's just, there's a substantial difference, because if we talk Northern Aggregate putting in a rail spur, well, my shop is a mile away from Northern Aggregate, and I've probably lost 5 years off of my life because of what they're punching into the air with smoke. And I'm not being critical of them, that's part of their industry, but that's different than what Bemidji Steel is doing. So I think that's a lot of the big concern here, is if we talk heavy industrial, that's one thing, because we want, because of our hub. But if we're talking light industrial, well, that's a totally different impact on the area there, so.
Thank you.
So an example is like where a railroad bed, and think, would anybody be opposed to Lund boats being in northern Hubbard County?
Well, that could be the proposal.
The reason they locate in the area they did is because of Highway 10. So there are, you can throw out hypotheticals after hypotheticals after hypotheticals, but there are many types of things that would not be a problem in an industrial park such as this. There would be many things that would be a problem in an industrial park, but we don't know any of that. We don't know any of that until we get to the point where we decide we're going to do this, and then we set the parameters of what we would allow and not allow in that industrial park.
And that's what I've told people to check out the industrial park in Bemidji. why you don't see any smokestacks or anything there. And that would be, as Jeff and
Park Rapids.
yeah, and David has mentioned too, with us having control of the property, you know, we're gonna be able to limit what goes in there. I also think about how automobiles are transported on rail, lumber. I mean, there's a lot of things that doesn't necessarily mean you have to have a big factory with big smokestacks in order to use the rail line. Amazon, here's another one that would ship a lot of things by rail. You know, so I think of all the possibilities. I also think about the negative things that could be there, and that's why with us being in control, we're gonna be able to limit those kinds of things. As far as this RFQ for today, I like the idea of exploring another site. You know, the one that was mentioned about between Highway 2 and 500 there, which would be east. I'm concerned about the reservation line. You folks might know, is that 322nd Avenue? Is that the line, or is the line?
323rd.
Okay, 323rd, that's the,
216 acres there, that is not on the reservation.
okay,
When you said 200 acres of contiguous property, there is
Okay.
216 acres between the railroad and Highway 2.
yeah, and I like this location in a sense. The only thing, and this isn't gonna be a bad thing either, if we went with this location and we wanted a rail spur, we would probably have to close down 500th Street. But as it's been noted, nobody lives on it really. We'd want to keep access, obviously, to the cemetery. But that, I'm looking at the map right now, you know, so that could all be worked around. But with this RFQ, there's the question, and it was brought up too, do we hire somebody to do some of this, or do we do a little bit more exploring ourselves and then readdress the RFQ? I guess that's a question I would have for the board.
I just have a couple of brief comments. You know, you mentioned Amazon, and I know Amazon is looking at developing a distribution center just outside of Brainerd-Baxter area. So that's just one thing that is happening in an industrial setting. There isn't a lot of opposition against it, except for the traffic component, obviously, because there's going to be a lot of deliveries going in and out of there. But if we move forward with an RFQ to do this, and say an alternate site is part of that RFQ, and an alternate site is chosen for some sort of light industrial or industrial park, the possibility of using the parcels that are currently owned by the HRA EDA, maybe those could be housing parcels instead of an industrial park. I don't know what kind of interest there is or the need for increased housing in the area, but that might be another option if we move forward with that sort of scenario.
I guess the way I see it is if we do pick an alternate site, we probably would have to sell the sites that we already had picked, that we have already acquired. Like Linda had commented, and I made the same comment about if the railroad crossing at 315th Street was closed down and the one on 323rd were closed down. But the one at 315th in that area that we were looking at north as light industrial, north of the rail line, the only way they could go would be past the Ferris Park. And I know that there's a lot of opposition to that, and I agree with that. So we might have to change that classification into a residential development instead of.
If we do a little more digging and looking into alternatives and whatnot, if we come up with an alternative site for any sort of industrial development, why would we have to sell the other property? Why not develop it as HRA property
Could hold it.
with housing?
You can just hold it for a
Cash
while.
flow?
Cash flow.
Yeah, I
cash flow.
realize that,
And-
but
And
this.
as the HRA, we could have acquired those properties at less than market value, if they were used for housing. Because we were intending them to be used for, development, we paid market rate, which means that housing becomes, exponentially
higher.
more difficult and more expensive.
Yep.
I'm not saying that that's not possible, just be aware of that because we paid market rate for those parcels, housing becomes exponentially more difficult.
I like the idea of putting out an RFQ for the planning portion because it gives us professional opinions about things like water quality options. Where you have opinions, but they're not professional, so in the long run, we have to have that done at some point.
Would you include the alternate?
I'm fine with that. Why not explore all the options?
Right. I don't think outside of the ones identified and presented in comment here, there's really any other TFL land around there that would make much sense. But if there is, you could, include those in the RFQ and see what the engineer comes back with.
One of my
Find out
questions,
that the site we picked is the preferred site. I don't know. We may come back with something different.
do we have any idea what an RFQ is gonna cost?
Larger than.
I would guess that the master planning process would be give or take $5,000, $15,000, Mary?
Yeah, I would say
15 to 20?
Is that for one site? So if you did two?
No, we're not gonna do the water testing, we're not gonna do that, we're gonna do some analysis of the maps. They're not gonna do anything like that for that kind of money, that's engineering work. They would facilitate the public process, hold the public meetings, get all the information that we have, make sure that it's shared in a way, and then bring that feedback together and take a look at, help you narrow down 2 or 3 options. I'm looking at the sites north of 500th Street, and I cannot come up with 200 acres. I'm coming up with 100.
All from the railroad tracks?
Yeah, I don't see it either.
500 Street, oh, it's a railroad tracks.
I'm only seeing this 120 acres here north of 500th Street because this acreage is more split than the stuff on the other side.
That's all tax forfeited land in here though
It-
as well. This is the railroad corridor here.
It is, but one of the criteria is for there to be 50 contiguous acres in a building site, and there's not 50 contiguous in any of these, which is, so 200 plus acres with 50 contiguous acre lots, that's why this didn't work. It also doesn't work because this is all wetland, so half of that's gone, and this is all wetland. So this is reduced to 50%, this 80 acres is reduced to 35.
But we take out 500th Street, right? So that would not signal that? You close that?
I'm really, that's what a planning process would do. That's why this is where I looked first, because it's on the highway. And then it was ruled out primarily by our environmental staff and just the other factors that we were looking at trying to meet. So, again, I'm not trying to solve a problem. I was just trying to, and now I understand where you're getting your number from. And that's calculating it differently than when we looked at it. The other clarification is what's included in the definition of light industrial versus heavy industrial, right? And we didn't say heavy industrial anywhere. We said industrial and light industrial. So, and the fact that there's no water or sanitary systems on site, the most likely developments are the type of developments that are already there. And the developments that are already in that part, within that 10-mile radius of Bemidji. It's not terribly likely that someone's gonna bring and start a nuclear plant there, as we were talking about this morning, right?
Maybe they'll build fish houses.
If they were, they wouldn't need us and they would just do it anyway because we have no zoning, but the best reason for modifying the RFQ to just do the master planning and the public process and get that done is so that everybody has a chance to be heard. If we don't do that, then really what we should do is we should probably list those parcels for sale. But we need to know, I believe, when I look, Fardin Township has an estimated market value of $250 million. We've had conversations with people who want to make a $50 million investment. So that would mean a reduction on your bill, on your local tax bill by about 20%. It's not $300, that's. No, I'm saying this, when Enbridge came through and cut off that 5 miles, and they went all the way through the western part of the county and all the way across the southern part of the county, their investment was over $300 million. That was significant. So a $10 million investment on $250 million worth of value would be noticeable. That's what I'm saying. They will make that investment knowing that they're not gonna pay Beltrami County taxes, and they're gonna get preferred contracting because Hubbard County is a hub zone.
So don't they pay less taxes then, if they're subsidized and abatements and stuff?
Two different things. A hub zone means that it's a qualified zone that gets preferential treatment in federal contracting. That's why Beltrami Steel moved into Hubbard County and out of Bemidji. And our county tax rate is half of what Beltrami County's tax rate is. Even in Fardin Township, when you compare your tax rate to somebody that's up in Beltrami it's not paying into Cass School, they're very comparable. So from that standpoint, yes, it'd be preferred, it would be preferred taxation rates to anything in the region that they would have that has access to Highway 2 and the rail line, if they were to need that.
I think just real quick, there's just the differentiation, that's a complicated word for me, I'm sorry, but between the heavy industrial, because I consider Ainsworth, Potlatch, Northern Aggregate, that's more the heavy industrial side. The light industrial, like Glen Boats, when you bring that up, I mean, and Bemidji Steel, you know, for me, I'm not gonna speak for anybody else, but I can wrap my feet around light industrial with less impact, because if Lund Boats came in there, yeah, there's a lot of impact, it does change our neighborhood, but if Northern Aggregate or Zavril and Sons wanna start up a asphalt plant back there, or graveling, that's a totally different scope of what we're talking about. I mean, that's two totally different impacts on the area. So I think that's just the biggest thing for me, at least, is there's a huge clarification needed behind, are we going for heavy industrial, which is a lot more contaminants into our area, whether it's noise or water or things, or are we looking to make a super industrial park like the Bemidji Industrial Park or Park Rapids, where it's a contained manufacturing facility where we really don't get much of any pollutions per se outside of that facility that affects our quality of life. I think that for me that's the biggest thing that I'm taking away, is there's a huge difference between those two, because I mean, if you sell it to gravel, it's like, man, I'm just telling you, that sucks. We live right next to them, we have to do that.
You would be-
Now put another one back behind there,
Yep.
and the smell.
So, yeah, we'll move on now.
You'd be hard pressed to do any kind of heavy industrial without city sewer and water.
Yeah.
But it says heavy industrial in the newspaper on here, so that's what we thought, heavy industry was coming. Many documents that were published said heavy and like a line would be between the two. So we misunderstood a lot, I think.
And exactly the reason why I think that the board should authorize an RFQ, so we can get somebody to come in and do a master planning process and scope what those definitions might be. Because they could identify, I mean, we're just shooting. We've had conversations with people who are interested in developing in northern Hubbard County. Does every single one of those turn into an opportunity? No. Can we tell you about every one we're talking about? No, because they're confidential. They approach us in a way of saying, we're looking at options, we're looking at this, and this, right? So if we do a master plan for a park and we identify what the noise levels, what the pollution levels, what the water needs, what the this and that are, and somebody comes and says, hey, you've got acreage for sale, do your conditions meet our needs? Yes or no? But we've gone through a master planning process and we scope that. We haven't done that yet. We need to do that before we can really make a decision of, are these parcels appropriate? And I think they are for a lot of reasons. The access is still negotiable. I don't care if we go down 45 and 9 and come in from the north and don't cross the pipeline. You know, it's 3-4 miles. Is that gonna make it harder to sell? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But that means there's less than a half a mile of road that needs to improve that doesn't go through the residential, it'd go past 2 or 3 residences. But County 9 is already 10-ton road, and that's already used for that purpose anyway. So, I mean, we can ask questions all day today, but we can't get any answers, and the answers we want is for me and Mary to step out of this and let somebody facilitate a conversation with the boards and the public and make some recommendations.
So I would support the RFQ. My only question is, should we add any other parcels into that RFQ? Yes or no? Either way, I personally would support doing the RFQ.
And I'd say yes to looking at additional parcels because, well, 2 reasons. 1, to see if they're better, and 2, to see if they're not better. You know, and then if they're not better, then how do we, if we're gonna continue with this area that we've already looked at and have already purchased, what do we have to do to make the least amount of impact on the area? You know, so, and like I say, so I think an RFQ would be important so we get more answers. And I believe we will get more questions at the same time. And in order to make an informed decision, I appreciate having more answers. And I appreciate the questions too. Because we don't know, you know, I'm not an industrial park developer, so I can't speak to what's best to do here. But like I say, I think if we at least send out the request for qualifications, and as Jeff has stated, we could just say no to all the requests that come in, or we hire somebody, they go through all the process, and then we decide, no, we don't like that either. You know, just because we're going down this road doesn't mean we're gonna end up there. So, we have a motion maybe?
I'll make a motion to accept, or
To let the RFQ.
let the RFQ
With
with
the-
some additional property, potential properties identified also.
Thank you.
I have one question before we do anything else. Is this schedule anticipated to be abided by? Because I think that's way too aggressive in my opinion.
Yeah, I think, I would at least think, I thought that too, but
It's way too fast.
Yeah.
I don't think all the information can be gathered and everything can be accomplished in that sort of timeline.
Just a
I
point of
just don't see it.
information, this is the timeline to submit and talk to the 3 or 4 people we know are interested, and for them to return a bid.
Not for the final information.
And then for them, they would start the project after that.
Yeah.
This gives them 3 weeks to respond to the RFQ.
Okay, all right.
Yep.
This
yeah.
is
Yeah.
not to give a result,
Okay.
this
Yeah.
is to
Thank you.
identify,
Thank you
this
for
is
that
to identify
clarification,
a
'cause
supplier.
it did not
No,
make
that-
sense to
No,
me.
that
No.
didn't make sense at all. This is
No, it-
just for to start the work.
It wasn't worded that way, so
Right.
I was a little, wait a minute here.
I'll second.
Looking for
Thank you,
a second,
Sharon.
Jeff.
I'll second.
so we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
I have a comment, because I really appreciate the idea of the neighborhood. As you guys were talking, I was thinking about a campground that was put in on a lake, was it last year or the year before, I don't remember. And a lot of the residents were very opposed to that. That property had been for sale for years and no one opted to buy it. And there's no guarantee who would buy this property. You know that if we put it up for sale. And so for me, this is the best solution for all of us to have information and then to move forward with making decisions after that.
All righty. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. 6B, Fardin Township Housing Parcel Update.
It doesn't matter. I can.
I would just simplify this and simply say that where we're at with the housing parcels is we're working with
Marie.
Matt Murray Consulting to do the work to identify the parcels. He is going to be bringing, hopefully bringing that plat to the Planning Commission for the June meeting. However, we have not gotten the deed for that yet, so that might push this back. But the intention would be to use these agreements that we had drafted by an attorney we work with for other land issues, to identify those minimum, if they buy the parcels, they're gonna build owner-occupied housing on them with a minimum of 960 square feet, and that they would do so within a period of time, because we're selling these at a reduced rate because we were able to acquire them at a reduced rate. So the goal is to have these parcels split and available to advertise for sale as soon as possible, but once we get the deed, then they have to go through the Planning Commission for the platting. And then the other piece is we'd split off that other 40 and offer it for the same kind of thing to see if somebody was interested in buying the 40 and developing along the same lines. And if they don't, then we would convert those to individual lots after we fill in the vast majority of the 7 on the east side. I think that's the current plan. We're waiting on the deed, and then we're waiting on Murray to go through and do the work with the Planning Commission.
The information is due to the Planning Commission by the 27th of this month, and so he is working on getting the information. The septic assessment has been done. We're waiting for the wetland delineation piece of that, and then he'll have all the information necessary to submit for the Planning Commission. And then they will take it up at their June meeting.
As long as we have a deed by then.
I thought we did,
We
'cause
don't have a
Lori
deed.
asked me.
We don't have a deed yet.
Oh,
So I just had a question, and maybe this is something to address later, but as I read through this, you know, the construction of the house, I believe, it needed to be complete within 2 years. But to me, my question is, does that mean everything on the interior needs to be completed, and how is that defined, or is just the exterior needs to be completed?
I would clarify, and thank you for that question, because there are question marks in here that you will have to determine what you want to put in there. We'll have to set a minimum bid price, we'll have to identify and specify that. Everything that's highlighted is, and we didn't, because we don't have a deed and because it hasn't gone through that process yet, we really wanted to give you an update because of the conversation, but we'll have to determine what these are.
So none of this needs to be
None of this has to be done.
submitted to that planning commission?
No,
Okay.
no.
nope. They just need to know the parcel splits and all that's gonna happen, and then before, in the June meeting, we'll try to clarify these as much as we can. And if it's timely and we're at the point where the planning commission can approve the plat, or they're at a process, we just have to have this done before we could offer them for sale.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of blanks in here thanks for asking that question. These are not done.
Yeah, that's one of the things I had, when you mentioned minimum bid, I noticed that wasn't in the
Yep.
purchase agreement there, so. Alrighty, so basically then 6B, this is just, there's no action to be
No
taken
action,
today.
no action required, just an update.
Alrighty.
Yep.
And are we done with 6B then? Alrighty, let's move on to 7A, camera upgrades, request for properties.
I did put information background in the item report, but basically DW Jones has determined that the cameras at our 4 multifamily properties are in need of an update in order to have them function. A few of them are completely inoperable, and so what they have done is went through a bid process and found that West Central would be able to use the majority of the cameras that are already in place. There's a couple that, because the system isn't working, we don't know for sure if the camera is working. So we may have to look at a couple of camera replacements. But this is really probably the most cost-effective method to get the cameras back up and running. I included the quotes for each one, but the total price is $11,482 for all 4 properties. And DW Jones does not have that in their budget, so they would be asking for the HRA to fund the purchase of the upgrades.
And the cameras, I guess, are important. I mean, these are HRA properties.
You know, it really does provide, if nothing else, a potential deterrent in that residents will know that, you know, if there's things that happen, they could be tracked. It also does help for unauthorized visits. You know, if people are on the property causing nuisances, we have a way of tracking that down. So cameras are really something that is important for these residential kinds of properties.
I think it is a good deterrent, especially if signs are posted too, that, you know, you're on camera. But I also think that this comes down to kind of a liability issue. If something happens within camera's view, that you have proof of it. And if there's damages and so forth to the common areas of the property, that you would have video proof that this is the individual, it's clearly shown on camera. It's a way to recoup some of the cost, you know, if you have to go through any sort of legal ramifications or whatever. Is there enough funds available to cover all of this comfortably without putting us in any sort of a pinch, I guess?
There is enough resources. We are in, we have the cash flow for doing that. We do need to do some additional research with Meadowview and Meadows Edge.
Okay.
Those properties are not performing as they really should be. I have been really scouring the financials that you got, and in a little bit more detail as well, and it's not evident what is going on, but those two properties are not performing like they used to or that they should be. So there's some ongoing investigation with those. As far as the overall financial health of the HRA, you have the resources in order to cover this.
I would certainly track how much expenses have gone up because of inflation since those
Well,
apartments
so-
were put in, and then look at the revenue. Almost would place a wager right now, our revenue increases have not kept up with the expense increases. I'll bet you that's at least a portion of it.
Well, there's a couple of things that Angie and I have talked about is, one, I did make note that it's really hard to make decisions when we're seeing financials that are from March. You know, the property taxes, if you saw on the list of bills, we had to pay the property taxes for those two properties. And based on what I see, there's no reason that should have happened. So, but I can't look in March's financials and understand what's happening in May. And so we do have to have a discussion about how do we get a little bit more real-time information. A couple things that she did note is that they have had quite a bit of turnover in those apartments. Again, not obvious in the way that they're providing information. So I didn't, you know, there's one vacancy and that's it. Well, you didn't say that it was vacant for 3 weeks between that time. I've also noticed that the receivables have gone up quite a bit in those two apartments. One of them in Meadowview, the amount of receivables is the same amount as 1 month's rent for the entire property. So their receivables are at $28,000, which part of it looks like it's damages of prior residents to the tune of about 18. So again, there's a bunch of stuff, but nothing that I can just look at and say, oh, there's the problem. So it is, we have to spend more time on those two apartment buildings with D.W. Jones and figure out sort of where things are going, because it's not exactly where it should be.
Can I ask a question? I noticed in the most recent statement from citizens that there are 2 checks written to D.W. Jones, $25,000, and neither one were signed by not either or both of us, but what were those for?
So, we got a request for, if you look at the list of bills, they're listed there, it's for property tax. We got a request very late that, they wouldn't be able to pay the property taxes by the due date. So we, Jeff and I did discuss whether or not that was an administrative item because it was the property taxes. And we issued those checks and Jeff and I sent them. And in fact, I had to walk them over to the bank in order for them to be deposited, for them to actually pay property taxes, to be postmarked by the 15th, so they weren't late.
As I've noticed, we were talking about, how much money we're bringing in. Our balance has gone very quickly from around 300 down to closer to 200,000 level. So we're getting to where we need to watch what we're spending.
Yes.
But we didn't think we wanted to pay a penalty on our property taxes. So,
doesn't look good
I said, yes, we can sign off that as something that we have to pay according to that list, and then we listed on the list of bills paid, which you approved in the consent. So we've got a list of, bills paid, and then we got a list, just like we do with the county, we have the auditor's warrants that they issue, and you approve after they've been paid, and the commissioner warrants, which you approve before the checks go out.
And the other part of the cash flow that Jeff and I and the auditor have to work out is how to transition the money. So the HRA typically had gotten the tax payments from your levy directly to us, as in the HRA. So a check would show up from the county to the HRA for the first half of the property taxes about the end of the month. So we would be expecting those about the end of the month. And then there's the request for the EDA portion. And we're trying to figure out how do we now, process-wise, make that happen. So the HRA has been paying the bills, but we haven't gotten the tax payments or the EDA portion of those resources back into the checking account. So it is deceptive that we are really losing, going down and down, but we haven't gotten that procedural part of the payment for the levy and the EDA portion. And we're trying to work, okay, how do we make that happen? Do we request it? Does it come automatically? How do we, so there's the process part that we're still trying to figure
that out
out.
pretty soon, I'm sure.
Yeah, we are. Now that the tax payments are about ready to come, we should be able to figure that out.
And now that we have a new auditor.
Yeah, so.
If I remember right, the rents are automatically gone up once a year, right?
Well,
Or an increase?
no,
They're not automatic, but they have.
Well, it comes before the board to increase
Right.
them, a certain percentage.
right, so prior to DW Jones taking over, I believe that the HRA board did approve some language that said that there was going to be a minimum increase in rents every year. With DW Jones taking on, I don't think that that's necessarily in place. However, they need to, in about September, October, come before the board in order to ask for increases for next year in order to make the timeline requirements. I fully anticipate that they will be asking for an increase, as David said, because prices are going up. And this will be now sort of the end of their second year of operations of this, so they should have gotten more standardized in the way that they are operating. But I do fully expect that they will ask for an increase of some kind. Back to the cameras.
Are we still on 7A?
Yeah, we're still on the
Vote on
cameras.
this yet?
Yeah, no, we digressed and went down a rabbit hole.
I'll make the
But-
motion.
We did.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, where was the chairman? Do I have a second?
Sure.
Okay, thank you, David. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Director's report.
I just have one item, and I was approached by deed staff. Why are you circling that?
Is that driving you crazy?
Yeah.
Don't like
I'm sorry. I won't look at the screen. Okay, so I was approached by the deed regional representative. There is a business in Hubbard County that is looking to submit a Minnesota Investment Fund application and a job creation fund application. And in both cases, the business would need the support of the EDA in order to submit those applications. We would need, at this point, an approval of the pre-application, which then allows them to start getting the information together. We have a due diligence process that we will need to go through. But right now, the business is completely confidential. I don't even want to sort of say where it is, just because we need to really respect that privacy. Suffice it to say, it would be a good for us to be able to go through the due diligence process on this business. Just as a quick reminder, MIF, Minnesota Investment Fund, is a grant to the business that it's mostly loan, but it can include a grant component, which is decided by this body. So you can say that up to $100,000 of that can be a grant, or you can say that that $100,000 has to be repaid. So that's one of the decisions that you'll want to start thinking about. The other component of that is you can determine on the other part, the state component, you get to decide what the interest rate is that the business needs to pay back. That is based on job creation and then a certain dollar value in improvements, and it's building based. The job creation fund is just that. It's a rebate on creating jobs. So the business signs up and says, yes, we commit to provide X number of jobs. Then they go about their relocation, establishment, whatever they're working on doing. And then as jobs are created, they report that to the state and then they get money. So it's a rebate program. So there's two components that we're looking at, and we just need approval to keep working on the process as a pre-approval.
One question I would have, will it be a good fit?
Yes.
And after the due diligence and the pre-application process, then you'll get all the information, you get all the details, and you'll have to make the determinations that Mary just mentioned about, is this a loan or a grant, or what kind of interest rate? This is no money out of Hubbard County EDA. This is simply us saying this is a good investment in our community. Right now, you're saying we'd like to know more about this investment in the community and ask Mary to contact those agencies and that business to tell them that they have the authority to proceed with the due diligence. Not deciding anything now. It will be a good thing. And all the detail, you'll have all the details after that pre-application process before you have to make a determination and set those other limits.
So we're looking for a motion to approve the pre-application process.
For MIF and,
I'll move.
Thank you, David.
I'll second.
Thank you, Steve. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. And that's it for the director's report. Is there anything else to come before the HRA EDA Board? If not, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Thank you, Shar.
I'll second.
Thank you, Steve. We are adjourned.
Just something to note, June 1st at Red River in Akeley, there's going to be a